All right, so we're diving deep into Star Wars, Skeleton Crew today.
Ooh, yeah, this one's got everyone talking.
It really does. Lots of buzz. So we got to break it down, right? Let's figure out if it lives up to the hype.
Definitely. Should be interesting.
Totally. And just so everyone's on the same page, it's happening at the same time as The Mandalorian, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Same timeline, different vibe.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of our lone wolf bounty hunter, we got 4 kids.
Lost in space.
Yeah, lost in space, trying to find their way back home. Sounds kind of basic, right?
Basic premise, big names though.
Oh, absolutely. Big
Oh,
names.
yeah.
John Watts, the guy who directed Spider-Man Homecoming, is running the show.
And Jude Law.
Jude Law. Don't forget Nick Frost voicing a pirate robot.
Oh, come on, that's gotta be good.
Seriously,
Yeah.
how cool is that? But there's this whole thing about Stranger Things, right? People keep comparing them.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
So that's what we're going to look at. We're diving into the reviews both from critics and the fans. Is Skeleton Crew just riding the nostalgia wave, or is there something more to it? Let's find out.
Okay, so Rolling Stone, right off the bat, they were all about the story. They actually praised it for having an actual story.
I like that. Because sometimes with these big franchises, it does feel like story takes a backseat.
Right. They go for the spectacle and forget, like, an actual plot.
Totally. So it sounds like Rolling Stone is saying Skeleton Crew is doing something a bit different.
Yeah, like, it's got depth. It's not just relying on the Star Wars name, which, by the way, Digital Spy kind of agrees. They definitely picked up on that whole 80s vibe, even comparing the setting to E.T.
Oh, interesting.
But they also said the show uses a lot of familiar stuff. Like they actually said the tropes deployed here are some of the most well-trodden ground in recent pop culture history. We've lived through more than a decade of 1980s pastiche.
Hmm. So they're acknowledging the nostalgia, but maybe not totally sold on it.
Yeah, like are they doing something new with it or just like retreading old ground? That's the big question, isn't it? And it's a big question for a lot of media right now. Like we're swimming in this 80s nostalgia.
You're totally right. Movies, shows, even music. Everywhere. So is Skeleton Crew just another part of that trend, or is it doing something more?
Right. Is it just a surface level thing or is there a deeper reason they're using these elements?
Exactly. Okay, so we talked about the neighborhood setting, but what else is making Skeleton Crew feel like Stranger Things?
Well, think about it. Stranger Things has that synth-heavy music, that sense of adventure, the kids facing danger together. Even the way it looks, they use a lot of practical effects. Skeleton Crew could be using those same elements to create a similar feeling.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So it's not just the setting, it's the whole mood, the whole aesthetic.
Exactly. All those little details add up.
So it's not all about the 80s, though, right? Some reviews, like IGN, didn't even really talk about it.
Yeah, they focused on other things.
They gave Skeleton Crew a 7 out of 10, which is pretty good.
Yeah, not bad at all.
And they said the kids were likable. Maybe a bit typical, but likable.
And that matters, especially for this kind of show.
Why? Why does it matter so much?
Think about it. If you don't connect with the characters, you're not going to care what happens to them. And in Skeleton Crew, the kids are the heart of the story. So if you like them, you're invested. You're along for the ride.
That makes sense. It's like, even if the story is familiar, if the characters grab you, you're going to enjoy it.
Exactly. And that brings us to Variety, which focused on the charm. They said the show has this real sense of wonder, even though they also mentioned the potential for nostalgia overload.
So they're saying it could be too much 80s, but the charm of the cast kind of saves it.
Yeah, and they specifically highlighted the cast's infectious sense of wonder. Even said, if Skeleton Crew can sometimes show signs of such coldly rational reverse engineering, the charm of its cast and their infectious sense of wonder goes a long way towards selling the endeavor.
Okay, that's interesting. It sounds like there's this tension between, like, calculated nostalgia and genuine heart.
And I think that sense of wonder is really important, especially for Star Wars. That whole franchise is about adventure, about exploring the galaxy.
Yeah, it's always had that optimistic, hopeful feel.
Right. And Skeleton Crew, even with its familiar elements, seems to be tapping into that same spirit.
Okay, so we've heard from the critics, but what about the fans?
Ah, the real judges.
Right. And they seem to be loving it. Skeleton Crew has a 93% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. But we got to remember, those early scores can be, a bit volatile.
Yeah, they can change as more people watch. But still, 93%. That says something.
Absolutely. It definitely suggests that the show is hitting the mark with its target audience.
Okay, so we got critics praising the story, the charm, the characters. Fans are on board. What's the final verdict? Is Skeleton Crew just a space-themed Stranger Things?
It's hard to say for sure. Maybe it uses those familiar elements, but it seems like it's trying to be its own thing, too.
Yeah, and don't forget the connection to The Mandalorian.
Oh, right. That adds a whole other layer.
For sure. And the fact that the cast is getting so much praise, that's a good sign.
Definitely. And that high audience score, that tells us people are connecting with it, and that's ultimately what matters.
So here's the big question for you all out there listening. With all this nostalgia, the kids' adventure, the tie-in to The Mandalorian, is Skeleton Crew trying to be, like, the gateway to Star Wars for a whole new generation?
It's something to think about.
It really is. New episodes are dropping every week until January 14, 2025, so there's plenty of time to catch up and decide for yourself.
Happy watching!
See you in the next deep dive.